Warning: the content in these videos is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. We do not condone or promote any of the actions depicted or described. These stories are presented to educate the public and share true events. Some material may be disturbing or inappropriate for certain audiences. We do not recommend that children watch these videos without direct adult supervision. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. True Crime Guide. On a cold February night in 2004, a young nursing student drove away from campus and into a New England mystery that would haunt a small town for years to come. Her name was Maura Murray. She was 21, bright, athletic, and someone who seemed to have a plan for the rest of her life. Instead, she vanished into the woods off a dark state road. And what was left behind? A damaged car, a few scattered items, a love letter of unanswered questions, has since become one of the most perplexing missing person cases in recent American history. The story begins, in a sense, like so many ordinary endings. Maura was a student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. A Friday in February, she told a professor she had a family emergency and would need to miss class. She made a few phone calls that afternoon. Friends later said she called her boyfriend and told him something had happened back home. She packed a small bag, put a few things in her car, and drove north. To anyone watching, it might have looked like a young woman leaving for a weekend with good reason. To those who knew her best, it looked like the first move in a very carefully planned vanishing act. Nobody could know then which it would be. She was seen driving on rural highways as dusk fell. Sometime in the evening, her car left the road on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, and struck a snowbank. A passerby stopped and called the authorities. Within minutes, a state trooper arrived on the scene. What happened next is where the stories begin to split and the threads of fact and speculation tangle. The trooper talked with the driver, Maura, according to reports. She seemed disoriented. She told him she had told people at work and school that she had a family emergency. She asked to use the phone. She left the vehicle with a bag in hand and walked into the dark, saying she would go to a nearby motel or to a friend's house to call for help. When the trooper returned a short time later, she was gone. Her car was left unlocked, keys inside, phone in the vehicle, and her purse, credit cards, and some cash were unaccounted for. Neighbors and later investigators would describe the site as quiet, cold, and blanketed in snow. Tracks in the drifts showed someone had walked toward the woods. Search dogs alerted nearby. Volunteers turned out. It's a tableau that feels both simple and impossible. A car in a ditch, a boot print disappearing into trees that could swallow a person whole. The officers, the neighbors, and the friends who rushed to the scene tried to reconcile two realities. They could see the physical proof that she was there, and they could not find the woman who should have been standing a few feet away. The immediate response to Maura's disappearance would be criticized. There are accounts that say the initial searches were inconsistent, that opportunities to capture more evidence were missed, and that the cold night had already hidden much that might have mattered. But where blame begins is not always where answers end. What matters to Maura's family is that a bright life stopped being accounted for, and every hour after that left fewer places to look and more room for doubt. In the days that followed, small pieces of Maura's life were reframed as possible clues. A hotel receipt dated the day before her disappearance was found. A phone call to her boyfriend left on his answering machine had a tone people later described as strained. There was talk of a canceled class, of a sobbing phone call to a supervisor, of an email that sounded like a goodbye. On the other hand, friends said she had been planning a future, applications to nursing positions, a drive across the country in the offing. The dual images of Maura, the one running from something and the one building toward everything, began to coexist in the public imagination. Detectives followed tips, sifted through witnesses, and retraced Maura's final hours. They examined her car, looked for DNA, and interviewed the trooper who last saw her. They issued missing person posters and posted her face on billboards and web forums. Community members and volunteers organized searches, combing the woods mile after mile in chilling February conditions. People brought lanterns and warm gloves. They were beginners and professionals, driven by the hope that a cold night could still yield a warm answer. But the woods were vast, and time is an enemy of evidence. Snow, thaw, weather, and the passage of seasons erased and muddied the footprints of that evening. As the weeks turned into months and the months into years, the case acquired the qualities of a modern myth. It has become layered with what-ifs and maybes. Theories proliferated, some plausible, some far-fetched. Some believed Maura had staged her disappearance deliberately, covering her tracks and walking away to start a new life. Others felt certain she had been killed, that she had been the victim of an opportunistic predator who took advantage of a vulnerable crash site. There were whispers about foul play on the road, about a stranger seen in the area, about a person last seen in conversation with Maura. Online sleuths combed through phone records, receipts, and bus schedules. Amateur detectives found patterns where professionals found only gaps. None of the theories have produced a conclusive answer. No body has been found. No confession has surfaced. No verified sightings led to a breakthrough. The evidence that remains is a handful of belonging, family photographs, a college diploma in waiting, the wrecked Saturn wagon that once carried her north, and the accounts of people who remember seeing her, talking to her, seeing her car in a ditch. Those human memories are fragile, subject to the slow fray of time and the unreliability of recall, but they are also the only threads left to hold on to. The family's pain has been magnified by the public nature of the search. Maura's mother and father have lived with the unknown for years, answering questions from journalists, fielding tips from strangers, and keeping alive the hope that a phone call, a knock at the door, or an anonymous tip will change everything. Friends remember her energy, her laugh, the trajectory she was building. For them, the case is not a puzzle to be solved, but a person to be found. There are also darker elements that have shadowed the investigation. Cases where evidence was mishandled, where early opportunities to preserve a scene were lost, and where miscommunication between agencies may have hindered a coordinated search. Critics have pointed to the initial emergency response and the small-town protocols that can sometimes be ill-suited to a missing person case that draws national attention. Yet even amid criticism, new investigators have returned to the case. Cold case units and independent researchers have walked the same stretch of Route 112 and re-examined the records, trying to see what earlier eyes might have missed. Through it all, the internet has played an unusual role. Online communities sprung up, some supportive, some obsessive, tracing every known movement, scanning for inconsistencies, and compiling timelines. Podcasts and documentaries reintroduced Maura's story to a new audience, generating fresh tips and old rumors alike. When you follow a case like this on the internet, you watch grief collide with curiosity, and sometimes compassion gets lost in speculation. For Maura's family, that confusion is yet another burden. For the public, it has turned a local disappearance into a modern American mystery. Despite the passage of time, the essential human questions remain. Did Maura leave of her own accord, fleeing a past we don't fully understand? Was she a victim of violence, lost in the winter dark before anyone could find her? Or did something nastier and more complicated happen that none of us can imagine? We may never know. The absence of an answer has, perversely, kept the story alive. Each anniversary brings new vigils, new emotional reckonings, new theories, and the same old pain. There is one thing that is often forgotten in all the speculation. Maura was not just a case file. She was a person whose absence broke an everyday life into before and after. Her family and friends mark holidays differently now. A bookshelf sits with a book she never finished. A collection of emails remains unread. Small rituals, answering the phone, driving down a particular highway, carry the weight of the unknown. That unknown creates its own kind of violence, the slow, relentless erosion of certainty. In many missing person cases, the question of motive becomes a mirror. People project their fears and wishes onto the empty space. Some are driven by the romantic idea of escape, a young woman abandoning a life that no longer fit. Others are pulled toward the darker corners of humanity, the possibility that someone waiting beside a road could do unspeakable harm. Both narratives tell us more about our own anxieties than about Maura. That fact makes the search for truth harder, not easier. Investigators still ask the same practical questions that any search asks. Where did she go after she left the vehicle? Who, if anyone, saw her after she spoke to the trooper? What was in the bag she carried into the woods? Did her cell phone ever ping off a tower in the days afterward? Answers to these questions require hard, tangible evidence. Witnesses, DNA, a definitive sighting that simply hasn't materialized in any conclusive way. So the case remains open in many minds and active in the hearts of those who remember Maura. There is an enduring hope among friends and family that a single overlooked detail will surface, that technology might catch what human memory cannot, that a conscience will one day break and tell the truth. Until then, every cold season returns an ache, and every stretch of dark road can trigger a memory of a car in a ditch and a young woman who walked away. For those who study disappearances, the Maura Murray case is a potent reminder of how fragile the line is between the seen and the unseen, the known and the inexplicable. It warns of the limits of investigation in the face of nature and time. It also teaches us about the human need to make sense of loss, to gather evidence, and to build narratives that help us sleep at night. If you live in an area where you think you might have information, no matter how small or how long ago, official channels exist to report it. Sometimes, what seems irrelevant to a passerby is exactly the detail that ties everything together. Families of missing people live on the slender thread of tips and memories. Even the faintest recollection can change the course of a case. For Maura Murray, that thin thread is all that connects the present to the night that changed everything. In the end, the disappearance of Maura Murray is not a neat story with a tidy resolution. It is a story of absence and of the way absence organizes memory, drives community, and refuses to let go. It's about a single evening that multiplied into years of searching, the ways in which lives are rearranged by questions that never close, and the painful truth that some mysteries remain stubbornly unsolved. And so we keep the watch. We keep the searches, the vigils, and the posters. We hold Maura in the fragile place where name and face stand for a life interrupted. We keep asking questions until the answers find us, or until someone who knows the truth finally decides to tell it. True Crime Guide. Thanks for watching True Crime Guide. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. If there's a story you'd like us to cover, drop it in the comments below. Your favorite case may just be next. Until next time, stay curious and stay cautious.